Hi guys, today we're talking about the foreign diplomacy in China. I think because recently we all know that China has swapped its foreign policy because like previously it's more like a moderate way, but now it's like after the famous movie like it's what's the name of the movie again? Like
Wolf Warrior.
Wolf Warrior. Oh yeah, of course. So after that we seem to find like more and more China foreign like embassies, some like even the ambassador sometimes it's like continually like mention about some strange things such as like everything is because of us, so like you have to respect our like perspective. Like the term they use for the respect I think is quite different compared to the word respect itself. How do you think?
Yeah, I think this is an increasing trend in China's foreign diplomacy that's probably somewhat driven by increased consumption of news by the average Chinese citizen. Uh, because previously, the average Chinese citizen, they didn't really care that much about foreign policy. And anyway, sometimes they might not even see stuff that goes overseas. But now the average Chinese citizen can consume more news. And anyways, they have maybe some of them have gotten richer and therefore they have the spare time to actually care slightly about what happens abroad. And therefore, sometimes I guess foreign policy, and it's not just in China, but basically every country,
Yeah, because
the foreign
nowadays like
policy
Trump
is,
supporters they really got the
yeah,
same
yeah,
idea like in that. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like we will get them and they are the enemy and we are very strong, but in the end maybe you don't do anything. But just saying this makes foreign diplomacy much harder because diplomacy only happens when both sides respect each other. And um and maybe you can like openly say, oh, I hate you, and like you and we are very very tough, and you suck or whatever. You could say that openly, and in private you have a different tone. But at some point it just becomes very difficult. For example, one area that's not really related to China is the the recent tension between France and the Islamic world because of a cartoon. One of France's teacher got beheaded by a terrorist, and this started a very big row between, for example, France and the Turkish President Erdogan. And what's funny is that Erdogan, a decade ago, let's see, uh, a decade ago, there's this pretty old conflict concept called clash of civilization. And a decade ago, Erdogan tried to say something completely different. For example, he tried to set up an alliance of civilization, which basically aimed to for everyone to conduct basically diplomacy between different civilizations and solve any problems. See, it was co-sponsored by Erdogan, but now he's basically taking the leading role in basically setting up a civilizational struggle. And as we had mentioned previously in our channel, it's pretty clear that he's just doing this in order to say, in order for his own domestic political agenda.
Yeah, I got a question here. So you mentioned before in our previous video that like like more people choosing to be more aggressive because of the social media and those sort of things. Like that's basically how Donald Trump got elected first place in the 2016. Is that part of the reason that most of the leaders now they trying to be more aggressive because their people now can see of each of their previous like say compromise being like exposed to the general public, and they don't actually accept to have any compromise?
Uh, I think that is part of it. Social media certainly plays a big role in letting the average citizen get a greater um, perspective on this. And anyways, the average citizen doesn't really care. They just want to feel good, and then they go back to their everyday lives. Like if the average citizen actually stops and really thinks about it, about the long-term consequences of, for example, worsening relations or whatever, they might say, hold on, let's not go that far, or let's not go that extreme in, for example, World War diplomacy. But the average citizen doesn't have time to think about it. They just say, oh, are we talking tough or are we talking weak? And that's it. They go back to their job. Or if they perceive the foreign policy to be weak, they'll say, oh, we are so weak. Our diplomats are going to surrender to our foreign adversaries. They suck. That's it.
So
They don't
I got
actually care
another
about
question
the
now.
nuances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So according to what you said, I was wondering if Donald Trump really doing a great job, because like at the same time he trying to be quite aggressive on Twitter or whatever, or in the foreign policy, but he actually have compromise between, like, previously have the trade war between China and US. So on the Twitter, he's really aggressive and keep mentioning something like, I'm tough to China and we already got victory, but actually under the table they do have compromise. Is that actually showing that he's doing a great job to keep both the people and actually the compromise both happening at the same time?
Yeah, I think on this front, he is doing a pretty good job. And it's a pretty unique thing that he's done. Like, as you said, he talks tough, but actually he might not actually be that tough. So, but basically, it's pretty unique what he's done. And that says more about the unique media circumstances in America than it says that other leaders could emulate him, because I don't think other leaders could really emulate him. Like Donald Trump supporters are basically trust him 100%, and also Donald Trump supporters tend to be the ones who would criticize their leaders as weak. And so because his supporters trust him 100% and thinks the media is lying, whenever the media, which doesn't actually care about being tough in the first place, point out that Donald Trump actually isn't that tough, his supporters won't believe the media. And his enemies, like Donald Trump's enemies, they didn't care about being tough all that much anyways. So they won't make a big deal of it either. So it's a pretty unique circumstance in America that kind of allows it to work, but I don't think other countries could really do that. For example, in China, basically the whole atmosphere assumes that the government might be weak, even though they actually kind of aren't in many cases. And so they're basically, in China at least, they're forced to take on more and more aggressive measures in order to placate the basic assumption that the foreign policy here is weak.
Right, and there's another thing, like in my personal view, that the actually wolf warrior is not just like being tough. Because recently I've seen some like weird stuff. It's more like a arrogant like style of the diplomacy, such as some of the official actually saying like, all this achievement is rely on us. It's like we support others and like we giving the others the opportunity to be rich or something else like that.
Yeah. This is definitely a big issue. For example, at the start of COVID-19, well, not exactly the start, late March, when China had pretty much handled the domestic situation and there was an issue in Europe and Korea or wherever, and China was sending out masks and equipment, and some of it had issues. Like, for example, when Czech Republic said that, hey, some of the masks you sold us are faulty, China responded very angrily, saying, how dare you accuse us of this thing, which turned out to be actually true. And at the same time, for example, when China gave masks or sold masks to Italy, they basically say, you should thank us and be grateful that we are selling you masks. And so it's basically like, you have to thank us or you are ungrateful. And we're going to basically, and if you don't thank us, we will be very angry at you. That's certainly not how you conduct diplomacy or foreign aid.
I think that's quite weird because,
actually, that's certainly not going to make people grateful. Like if you force them to say thank you, they are not going to be grateful to you.
Yeah, it's kind of like an old saying in China, like you give the food for the beggars and say, now you must thank me. It's quite weird. It's like thankfulness is definitely not depend on the people who providing the help, but by the people who is like receiving that. It's actually like, as a person, you shouldn't, like, we never been taught like after you're helping others, you must demand them to show they're thankful.
We only teach you to like thank others after they help you, and no one teaches you to demand others to thank you after you help them. Or in this case, actually not really. China just sold the masks. Most of the masks were sold, not given. So there actually isn't that much thanks.
Like simple commercial stuff, not actually even about the quality.
And anyways,
if you don't sell to them, no one gonna buy anyway.
In terms of the medical equipment, actually the medical equipment is now turning out to be great for China's export industry. So actually China should be thanking them for making China's exports very competitive and whatever.
Yeah, make China great again.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that we need to mention today?
What about our guest?
All right.
I don't really have any say about it.
All right, fine.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
Yeah.